The woman pay 50 billion. Just to buy a slave. Everyone thought she was crazy. Little did they know she had already died once. She had to grasp this lifeline in front of her. Only by buying this slave could she leverage his strength to drag her fiancé, who tormented her in her past life, straight into hell. Just now, Ariane finally received her father's permission to adopt a younger brother, so she hurried to groom herself, wearing a diamond necklace worth over 100 million. But in the end, she was still late. Yet, as the richest woman in the empire, being the wealthiest meant she had her ways. She casually bought a VIP seat for 10 million, and to express her apologies, with a grand gesture, she declared that she would cover everyone's tickets. The first-person viewing seats indeed had an excellent view. You could clearly see the expressions on every slave's face. Suddenly, the audience around erupted in loud shouts. Cassidon. It was then that Ariane noticed the silver-haired slave. Wow, this person is really handsome. No wonder he's so popular. At that moment, the audience began to stir again. Everyone was eagerly urging for it to start soon. Over a dozen slaves were madly rushing towards the weapons ahead, because whoever gets the weapon first will have the chance to stand out in this bloodbath. But only Cassidon stayed in place. Ariane was extremely worried. After all, she was counting on taming him to take revenge. Just be careful not to get killed easily. The slaves in the arena were fighting fiercely to survive. They were slaughtering each other violently. The audience clenched their fists in excitement. It was then that Ariane realized these slaves lived worse than livestock. At that moment, a man launched an attack on Cassidon. He thought that being unarmed would lead to his demise. Unexpectedly, Cassidon only needed one punch. He beat the man who had no way to defend himself. Then he swiftly seized the opponent's weapon. In an instant, he severed the man's neck. The splattering blood stained the silver-haired man's face. And with a thud, this powerful slave also fell to the ground, explaining. The audience was startled and turned pale with fear. Once he realized, a deafening sound erupted again. Cassidon's name echoed in every corner. But there wasn't a trace of joy on the silver-haired man's face. He merely stood there dumbfounded. His eyes were filled with expressions of despair. Then the slave owner announced. The highest bidder can spend a night with Cassidon. Ariane was so shocked by this news that she couldn't speak. What kind of wolfish words are these? But at this moment, Cassidon's expression remained unchanged. No joy or anger could be seen. But the audience who liked Cassidon had already started bidding. I'll offer 200,000 gold coins. An old geezer claimed he would offer 500,000. The slave owner was so happy he couldn't close his mouth. Just when the old geezer was determined to win, a slender hand was raised in the crowd. I'll offer 5 billion. At this moment, Ariane had a shy look on her face. Can 5 billion buy him? The slave owner went mad upon hearing this. The audience went crazy upon hearing this. But Ariane didn't find it inappropriate at all. I'm asking you a question. Can buy or can't buy? Can buy it, can buy it. Can buy or can't buy. The slave owner was so happy he was about to kneel down. The old geezer before was so angry he was gritting his teeth. In this way, Ariane led the man onto the carriage. Before leaving, the slave owner specially saw them off. I wish you both enjoy yourselves. Ariane brought the man into the room. She was just about to talk to him about adopting him. To her surprise, the man had already started to undress. Ariane angrily questioned. What are you doing? Master, I will serve you now. Ariane was stunned on the spot. The woman spent 50 billion. Just to buy a slave. She intended to train him to become the most capable assassin. But the man was only interested in cuddling with Ariane. He took off his clothes and began to show off his steel abs. The scene was too eye-watering. Ariane hurriedly stepped forward to help him put on his clothes properly. Cassidon looked utterly incredulous. You didn't buy me for this, did you? The clever Ariane immediately turned into a dramatic actress. She held his hand in an incredibly caring manner. I just want you to feel better. I don't want you to become a tool for the audience's amusement. After saying that, she also used her ancestral healing technique. Helped the man quickly heal his wounds. Seeing this, Cassidon stood there dumbfounded. What? This woman is extraordinary. I felt her aura was quite unique back in the arena. Ariane had no choice but to explain. This is due to her family's ancestral ointment. Cassidon then asked again. Why choose to save him? You should know he carries countless lives on his shoulders. Ariane seems to have 180 eyes. This is a great opportunity to extract the other person's true identity. You definitely didn't do it on purpose. By the way, how did you become an arena fighter? Cassidon bluntly states it's because he's an orphan. I can only make a living this way. I didn't expect this guy to be so guarded. Ariane had long noticed. This slave has a unique aura about him. Who would believe he is an orphan? But Ariane still told the other party with a sincere expression. She was the only daughter of the Earl's family. Moreover, when she learned that the man was 2 years younger than her, he immediately proposed to adopt him as her brother. Cassidon felt that this woman was definitely talking nonsense. But Ariane once again assured the other party. She wanted him to become a member of the Earl's family. To demonstrate her sincerity, Ariane was the first to get up. She extended her warm palm to Cassidon. Cassidon did not hesitate either. She readily agreed to it. As long as it's the master's order, I will obey your commands. Ariane continued to win people's hearts. You're welcome. From now on, we are family. At this moment, Cassidon couldn't help but redden his eyes. In Ariane's eyes filled with anticipation, he softly called her, sister, little bean comic explanation. Who would have thought that after this, it would spiral out of control? Cassidon kept calling her, sister, non-stop. However, Ariane felt neither touched nor joyful. Her sixth sense told her that this slave had a secret. But her only aim was to have him take revenge for her. Of course, she also needed to protect herself and her father. Therefore, Ariane didn't speculate too much. And so, she brought her brother home. But at this moment, a sense of guilt arose in Cassidy's heart. He even silently pleaded with his sister, comic explanation, to use him. Just like how he was now using this sister to change his fate. But just after returning home and telling his father about it, father erupted in fury. You actually brought a slave back to be your brother. What on earth do you want to do? Ariane quickly tried to calm her father down. Father, I just want him to take your place on the battlefield. Moreover, Cassidy is exceptionally strong. He can return safely from the battlefield as well. After hearing this, her father was moved to tears. He then began to apologize to his daughter. I'm sorry, I understand your intentions now. He then went back to his room with a shameful expression to reflect on his actions. As dusk arrived, Ariane suddenly felt a sharp pain in her heart. It turned out to be the moment when the red sun was setting in the west. In her past life, it was exactly at this time that she was stabbed in the heart by her fiancé, Damien. Now, this pain in her heart seemed to constantly remind her, never forget how you died in humiliation. Thinking of all this, she specifically came over to check on Cassidy's condition. The man in front of her had just finished bathing. He now looked like a prince straight out of a fairy tale. Yet Cassidy meekly murmured, someone like me doesn't deserve all of this. Ariane looked heartbroken. Don't say that. You are now my own brother. Sister, I will definitely prove my worth. Just as Ariane thought she had gained the other's trust, the man suddenly expressed his desire for a sharp sword. The reason is that there are always weapons nearby. It feels very strange this way now. Ariane was initially hesitating whether to agree. Cassidy took Ariane's hand again with an eager expression. I seem to have developed feelings for you. I'm on it. You are all I see. After saying that, he dropped a passionate kiss on the back of Ariane's hand. But Ariane is no innocent girl. You're working hard, Cassidy. We've only known each other for a day, and you already want to seduce me. Because Ariane saw in the other's gaze. Don't abandon me. Then Ariane also reassured Cassidy. Don't worry, I will never abandon you. But before leaving, Cassidy suddenly asked Ariane a strange question. Can I come to your room to find you tonight? Not lying on the same bed as his sister. He couldn't sleep. So when her sister rejected him, tears of grievance were about to fall from her eyes. But looking at her brother's steel abs, Ariane only felt a wave of embarrassment and shyness. She was just about to find an excuse to avoid it. Who would have thought that Cassidy had already acted before her? He sat at the edge of Ariane's bed. To ease the atmosphere, Ariane quickly changed the subject. You can just sit there. I am currently reading. What shocked Ariane was, Cassidy surprisingly read the title of the book directly. You must know that in a clearly stratified empire, most people do not have the opportunity to learn to read. Thinking of this, Ariane felt even more that this seemingly weak brother in front of her, there must be a hidden past behind him. But she felt it was unnecessary to question it further now, because she knows the current Cassidy. He hasn't completely let go of his guard around her. To win people's hearts, Ariane made a significant decision. She actually agreed to let her brother sleep with her. What's excessive is that Cassidy leaned straight down, just a little, and he would kiss Ariane's lips. But Ariane did not flinch at all, because she suddenly realized, this is Cassidy testing himself on purpose. After all, at the moment she bought him. The other party once questioned if she was driven by some desire. Now Ariane just needs to prove she herself doesn't need this kind of service. So she generously moved to one side of the bed. She even specifically cleared a spot for Cassidy. Cassidy once again transforms into a pitiful little puppy. He tells Ariane about his miserable fate. My life is so hard. I dream every day of those I killed demanding my life. Ariane had to comfort him. None of this is his fault. He just wants to survive. After speaking, he also extended his palm, drawing explanation of stroking Cassidy's silver hair. I don't want those past events to bring you pain. You will be happy every single day from now on. In a moment of excitement, Cassidy grabbed Ariane's hand. Thank you, sister, for taking me home. Then Ariane pretended to be asleep. She wanted to see what Cassidy was really up to. The clock on the wall was still ticking. Ariane could clearly feel that he was looking at her. To confirm, she secretly opened her eyes a little. But she happened to meet his burning gaze. Startled, she quickly closed her eyes. Suddenly, Cassidy raised his hand. It seemed like he wanted to touch Ariane's body. Ariane instinctively clutched the blanket. But the other party just gently said good night. Then she got up and left. Waiting to confirm that Cassidy really left, Ariane finally relaxed and opened her eyes. She couldn't help but underestimate this guy. He was truly a liar. But wasn't she also one? Bringing someone home under the guise of adopting them. But in reality, she wanted to train this person to be her tool. At that moment, Ariane suddenly felt inexplicable understanding of Cassidy's actions. But she really knew too little about Cassidy's past. In her past life, she had only seen him once beside the crown prince. If she wanted to completely tame him now, Ariane decided she needed to investigate his past thoroughly. The woman spent 50 billion recklessly, just to buy a slave, and to make her father adopt this slave as a son. Ariane was willing to sever ties with her father. It turned out that her father had always harbored animosity toward Cassidy. He would never allow a lowly slave to become part of the family. So he deliberately made things difficult for the other person, making him go to the place guarded by monsters to fetch herbs, to the point where Cassidy ended up covered in blood. Now he even had to kneel on the ground and await his father's judgment. And this scene happened to be witnessed by Ariane. Seeing that Cassidy's clothes were already soaked in blood, Ariane was so worried that she was about to cry in the next moment. However, Cassidy gently comforted her. That blood is from the monsters that were killed. It's okay. At that moment, Ariane could no longer endure it. Father, what exactly do you want to do? But her father bluntly said it was to test the other person. Ariane helplessly retorted. Cassidy had already brought the herbs. This ends everything. Afraid that her father wouldn't agree, Ariane then unleashed her trump card. Otherwise, just expel me from the family as well. Ariane's father instantly became furious, his veins bulging. Do you even know what you're talking about? Cassidy was also stunned in place upon hearing this. You must understand that before this, he was fighting in the arena. He was always trampled underfoot. Now, for the first time, someone is defending him. However, what he didn't know was that the reason this woman in front of him was doing this was entirely to win people's hearts. Ariane's father did not understand her at all. Why am I so fascinated by a slave? Little bean comic explanation. Ariane had long thought of a justification. Because he, like us, is also a human. The titles we hold are all meaningless things. Cassidy looked at the woman defending him. For a moment, his heart was in chaos. In the end, the father could not oppose his daughter. In utter unwillingness, comic explanation. In the end, I reluctantly agreed to adopt Cassidy, drawing explanation. Ariane transformed into a master of changing faces. She suddenly dove into her father's embrace. You are truly the best father in the world. Cassidy stared blankly at this happy scene. She could only feel immense envy. Suddenly, Ariane reached out her warm palm to her. Cassidy understood intuitively. He hurriedly called the Earl, father. In this way, Cassidy finally had his own home. And Ariane felt the same way. Made a step closer to his own goal. Soon, the sky darkened. Cassidy took off his clothes to prepare for a shower. That back covered in scars was shocking to behold. As a slave who has been beaten for years, he didn't take these injuries seriously at all. Instead, it repeatedly came to mind. The way Ariane pleaded for him. He almost couldn't help but call out, sister. Then a meaningful smile crept onto his lips. This sister is really a strange woman. Suddenly, he remembered again. Last night, he secretly stroked his sister's hair. Cassidy comforted himself that it was just to annoy Ariane. That feeling was like becoming a mischievous child. He really enjoyed it. But no matter what, he absolutely will not allow himself to become emotional about anyone. Cassidy has only one purpose in living. That is to use everything that can be used right now. The daughter suddenly brought back a slave. She even let him lie on the same bed with her. Her father was so angry he directly spat 10 kilograms of blood. But Ariane still ignored everything, even satisfying all the requests of her slave brother. No problem if you want the sword. Ariane directly offered 2 billion. Bought the previous Highland Kingdom. The sword of the deceased prince. The sword is very exquisite. It perfectly matches Ariane's intentions. After all, it's the first time giving a gift to my brother. Of course, I should be generous. The only regret is that this sword has no scabbard. But Cassidy was stunned the moment he saw the sword. Where did you find this sword? I specifically bought it for you, of course. Cassidy suddenly asked about its scabbard. Ariane was very surprised upon hearing this. How did you know this sword has no scabbard? Fortunately, Cassidy reacted quickly. I just asked out of curiosity. But Ariane still harbored suspicions about Cassidy. About his behavior just now. This slave seems to have too many secrets. Not only can he read, but now he can even recognize that such a fine sword has a scabbard. But Ariane did not eagerly question him, but secretly sent the maid to investigate. As expected, the maid brought back important news. She actually found the first slave trader who took in Cassidy. That person said when he first met Cassidy, was wearing expensive clothes. At first, he thought Cassidy. He must be the young master of some prestigious family. So it can be affirmed now. Cassidy's identity must be extraordinary. He is definitely not a child of a slave family. Ariane quickly regained her composure. Thinking of that unique temperament of Cassidy, she became even more convinced that he was born of noble blood. After all, temperament is such a thing. It cannot be forced or cultivated. Ariane suddenly thought of what Cassidy said to himself before. He has no family now, and they have not existed for a long time. Ariane suddenly realized Cassidy's family must have suffered a catastrophic disaster. Thinking of this, Ariane secretly told herself she promised to treat him better in the future. So when Cassidy begged to sleep with her again, Ariane agreed without the slightest hesitation. Cassidy looked at his older sister in front of him. She gently asked why he was so good to her. However, Ariane told him she just wanted him to be happy. Such an answer left Cassidy unable to sleep for a long time. He quietly watched over Ariane as she entered slumber. It was as if he was guarding the most precious treasure. That night, Ariane slept very unsteadily, because she dreamt of the scene where her fiancé from her past life killed her. Damien's expression was so terrifying. This caused Ariane to wake up suddenly from her dream. She was breathing heavily. It was then that Ariane realized Cassidy had already gotten up. At that moment, the maid rushed over. Miss, what's wrong with you? I feel like you've been different lately. Ariane didn't know how to respond at that moment. She really hadn't expected it to have returned to life. The maid was actually the first to notice her abnormality. The wealthy heiress who wouldn't spend 3 cents on a bottle of water, now was willing to splurge 20 billion to buy her brother a sword, just to win his favor. But who would have thought that her brother pretended to be deeply moved on the surface, while deep down he believed no one. He was simply a liar. He had never told Ariane a single truth. He even stole the secret to the healing arts that Ariane was studying. However, Ariane did not make a big deal out of it. Instead, it was a gentle inquiry. Did you take a book from my room? Cassidy replied calmly. No, sister, I didn't. How could I be that kind of person? Ariane felt helpless. She could only silently curse his ancestors in her heart. Clearly, that night, you were the only one in my room. And now you still want to deceive me. However, Ariane still gave him face. She didn't expose him on the spot. Yet, Cassidon became more daring. He transformed once again into a liar. Sister, look at this blue flower, it's as beautiful as you. Saying this, he reached to pick it for Ariane. Ariane intended to return the favor. You are just as handsome, after all. The next moment, she also gave Cassidon a flower. And Cassidon had quite a thick skin. She surprisingly pinned the flower directly on her clothes. At this moment, Ariane felt more than ever that he was very scheming. Ariane couldn't understand. How could someone so vigilant be willing to submit under the crown prince in the previous life? But now is not the time to think about this. Ariane must find every possible way to completely tame Cassidon. For every day her fiancé lives, Ariane suffers another day. Fortunately, as Cassidon spends more time in this house, her father finally acknowledges his existence. However, he repeatedly cautions her not to let anyone know about his status as a slave. But her father's worries are truly unnecessary, because Cassidon is exceedingly handsome. With just a little grooming, he can dazzle anyone. No one suspects he is a slave at all. That day, Ariane came again to pry into Cassidon's background. What were your parents like? They are all good people. Ariane, undeterred, continued to ask. Don't you have any siblings? No, I am an only child. Then, Cassidon intentionally changed the subject. Sister, you look really beautiful today. Ariane was overjoyed by the compliment. So, do you have anything you want? To her surprise, he directly took Ariane's hand. I just want to be with you forever. Ariane could only respond to Cassidon with an awkward smile. This guy is too cheesy with his words. Suddenly, Ariane told him. Because my father is away on a trip, I have to take my father's place to attend the Crown Prince's birthday banquet next week. Cassidon's eyes became a bit deeper upon hearing this. He then stepped forward and wrapped his arm around Ariane's shoulders. Sister, take me with you. I'm worried someone else will take you away. Ariane certainly knew Cassidon had other intentions, but she still agreed to his request. She really wants to see. What exactly is Cassidon going to do? The woman was sleeping without a bra for the first time. The younger brother was about to crawl into her bed. He thought the other person was too timid to sleep alone. Little did he expect Cassidon was actually stealing things. He not only stole Ariane's favorite books, he sneaks out of his room every day at 1 in the morning. No one knows what he went to do. Even when Ariane asked him, Cassidon just responded lightly. I just went for a walk. But the maid clearly said he would return by dawn. Who goes for a walk all evening? So Ariane decided to teach Cassidon a good lesson. Did you steal my book? Sister, what nonsense are you talking about? How could I steal your things? But you were the only one who entered my room that night. Do you think I'm a fool? Seeing that sister was angry, Cassidon hurriedly admitted his fault, and also admitted to her own thievery. But Ariane suddenly reached out to stroke Cassidon's cheek. I'm not angry because you stole my things, but it's because you were lying to me. Cassidon suddenly tightened his grip on Ariane's wrist. Since you know it's me now, why don't you kick me out of the house? Because you are my most cherished family. At that moment, Cassidon increased his grip, afraid that the woman before him might suddenly disappear in a flash. Sister, you are electricity. You are light. You are the only myth that redeems me. Shy Ariane hurriedly changed the subject. Actually, what do you want? I will buy everything for you. Cassidon also stated. She would never lie to her sister again. Little being comic explanation. The two resolved their misunderstanding while joking together. In the evening, Ariane saw news about her fiancé again in the newspaper. She did not expect that sickly body. She could still win first place in the swordsmanship competition. The reborn Ariane certainly knows. Damien had severe heart disease. It was still she who treated him back to health. Now, seeing news about Damien again, Ariane's feelings of admiration and affection were gone. All that remains is deep hatred. She will never forget how that man trampled on his own dignity. He not only got intimate with other women in front of her. In the end, she even stabbed her own heart without hesitation. Suddenly, a knock sounded at that moment. It turned out to be Cassidon coming to find her again. Ariane was afraid of revealing any flaws. She hurriedly hid the newspaper behind her. You haven't come to sleep with me for several nights now. Cassidon had a teasing expression on his face. Is my sister waiting for me? Yes, I'm really worried that you can't sleep well. Cassidon frankly said he was very happy to hear that. After saying that, he dove into his sister's bed, and looking at the woman in front of him with dark golden hair, Cassidon couldn't help but be stunned. You are all I can think about right now. Soon, the day lightened. The maids quickly helped Ariane wash up and get dressed. You must know that today, their young lady is she going to attend the Crown Prince's birthday party. When everything was ready, Ariane was dressed in a blue gown. She looked just like a fairy tale princess. The maids were left dumbfounded. At this moment, Cassidon also hurried over, and the reason he wants to go to the Crown Prince's birthday party. But there are ulterior motives. A scene of blood and chaos is waiting for Ariane, the slave she bought at the arena. I didn't expect him to be a prince of a fallen kingdom. And he, relying on Ariane's connections, right in front of all the nobles, he poisoned and killed the current crown prince. Watching a former enemy fall before him, his eyes were filled with a sense of pride. Just now, Ariane brought her brother to the Crown Prince's birthday banquet. However, Cassidon's appearance is too outstanding. A group of wealthy young ladies is like a pack of wolves that have found their prey. They swarm over. Hello, I am the only daughter of Count Gigan. Your brother is way too handsome. Immediately, another woman hurried over. Young Master Cassidon, why don't you come to my house to play for a couple of days? Unexpectedly, Cassidon replied. I already have someone I like. The first time I saw her, My beloved was wearing a blue dress. The woman was heartbroken to hear this. Ariane, however, felt that something was increasingly amiss. Could it be that this guy is talking about me? So she shouted at Cassidon to shut up quickly. Just then, the esteemed crown prince also arrived at the banquet. Everyone turned to look. Everyone bowed respectfully to the crown prince. Until the crown prince took his seat, no one dared to relax in the slightest. However, the crown prince had a kind expression. He raised his cup to drink with everyone. But at that moment, Ariane noticed casually, and found that Cassidon's expression was quite strange. The most important thing is that he didn't drink a single drop. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the crown prince's area. The crown prince suddenly collapsed to the ground. He was completely unconscious. The guard shouted angrily, "Who in the world did this? There is poison in the wine." Sure enough, a female guest who drank the wine also fainted. Ariane was horrified. What is going on? In her past life, there was no incident of the crown prince being harmed. In Ariane's memory, the little bean comic explanation, this banquet would last until very late, and her enemy, Damien, would arrive a little later. Everything happening now is too abnormal. Ariane couldn't help but think of Cassidon. It was then that she remembered. Cassidon had been begging her to bring him along before. And now, Cassidon seemed completely unflustered. Instead, there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. But why would Cassidon do this? In the previous life, he respects the crown prince more than anyone else. At this moment, Ariane thought of something else. Cassidon once said, his own family is no longer around. Moreover, he can easily recognize the sword of the heir of the Highland Kingdom that has already perished. Ariane couldn't help but speculate. If Cassidon is the heir of the Highland Kingdom, then everything can be easily explained. Yet clearly, in Ariane's past memories, Cassidon is the crown prince's trusted aide, and he served the crown prince for a full 3 years. Has he also been secretly looking for an opportunity for revenge? But noble as he is, how did Cassidon endure the daily life of a slave? How did he gradually pretend to be pitiful in front of others? Hiding one's inner world, huh? Suddenly, Ariane glanced at the hand touching Cassidon. You're the heir of the Highland Kingdom, right? Cassidon instantly panicked upon hearing this. What are you talking about, sister? Every time the woman used healing magic, it would shorten her life by a year. But in order to clear her brother Cassidon of the killer's suspicion, Ariane decided to use healing magic to save the crown prince. However, at this moment, the crown prince's face had lost all color. It was clear that the toxin had already spread throughout his body. And through observation, Ariane discovered that the poison in the crown prince was colorless and tasteless. In a moment of urgency, she had no choice but to roll up the crown prince's sleeve. She focused on examining the details of the other person's body. Ariane then realized, the poison in the crown prince is a highly toxic plant known as butterfly grass. This herb only grows in the north. Moreover, Cassidon had previously stolen a glance at it, the book that removes the scent of butterfly grass. Given the crown prince's current condition, as long as it took one more minute, he would only be able to lie in bed sick for the rest of his life. Thus, Ariane disregarded the formalities between ruler and subject. She hurriedly unfastened the crown prince's clothing. She placed her hands on the other person's chest. She began to perform her healing techniques. In an instant, the light burst forth. The crown prince was radiating a brilliant light all around him. Suddenly, the crown prince let out a heavy sigh. It was only then that Ariane stopped. She hadn't had a chance to rest yet. Then he immediately reported the situation to the emperor. He stated that all toxins had been completely eliminated. The emperor was extremely grateful. This is truly thanks to you. He immediately became furious again. The killer actually dared to attempt murder against the crown prince in broad daylight. I think he is tired of living. Upon hearing this, Ariane was very worried about Cassidon, who was still outside. If His Majesty the Emperor were to investigate thoroughly, Cassidon will definitely be exposed, as explained by Little Bean. Cassidon had already started trembling, as explained by Little Bean comic. But thankfully, only Ariane noticed his abnormality. She comforted herself that she could protect him. Fortunately, Ariane successfully saved the crown prince's life. His Majesty the Emperor now trusts her a lot. Clever as she is, she immediately thought of a win-win solution. Ariane told the Emperor, saying, this poison only grows on the northern butterwort, as explained. Because the Emperor's brother once explained in a comic, he is the ruler of the northern territory. This way, we can quickly divert the Emperor's attention. What's more crucial is, the Emperor's brother's only son left in the world. It was none other than her enemy from her previous life, Damien. As expected, the Emperor had an expression of understanding. It seems he has begun to suspect Damien. Because Damien is indeed very ambitious. In Ariane's memories from her past life, Damien was always involved in the struggles of the palace. He often came home covered in blood. Furthermore, what raised the Emperor's suspicion of Damien was that ever since the crown prince was poisoned and fell into a coma, he had not appeared at all. Therefore, Damien fit the profile of a killer threatening the throne perfectly. So even if Damien could luck his way out of the suspicion of poisoning this time, he would inevitably face suppression from the Emperor in the future. Thinking of this, Ariane felt a surge of satisfaction in her heart. At this moment, Ariane felt it was time for her to leave. So she politely took her leave from the Emperor. Who would have thought the Emperor would actually want her to stay? She accompanied the crown prince directly. Ariane had no choice but to obey. After all, Cassidon had cleared his name now. She wasn't in a big hurry to go home either. The Emperor was very pleased with Ariane's performance. He even uncharacteristically said thank you to Ariane. Ariane felt a bit ashamed for a moment. She didn't understand why the Emperor trusted her so much. Could it be that he considers himself a candidate for the crown prince's consort?